Well, South Africa's telecom sector is set to boast the continent's most advanced networks. That's in terms of technology deployed and the services provided. Joining us for more insight on telecoms in Africa and South Africa is Dobek Pater from Africa Analysis. Morning, Dobek. Morning. Earlier in the program, I was speaking to Margaret Chalwe, who's the Director General of ICT and that stuff in Zambia.
Yes.
Talking about them being well placed regionally and geographically to be a player there. And I put it to her that one of the issues with countries where the infrastructure is behind, say, Europe and the United States is you've got to make calls on investment. But in recent years, the technology has moved so fast. By the time you get to implement your plans, there's actually new technology. Maybe your plans are irrelevant.
Oh, that's correct. Well, the plans, I think the plans may remain valid as long as you only start crystallizing your, your plan, what actually to deploy in terms of technology closer to the deployment timeline. Obviously, you need to do your budgets beforehand. But you're absolutely right, particularly when it comes to, I think, government, intergovernmental organizations. We've seen examples before where government organizations will plan, but because their cycle is so long from planning to implementation and things go relatively slowly, you're right, you can be surpassed quite easily or leapfrogged by new technologies, and then all of a sudden your planning needs to change. The private sector is a lot more agile in that sense, so they'll spot an opportunity or decide they need to deploy a new technology, new network, and allocate capex, and probably within a year they're out there doing it. So in that sense, they can take more advantage, I think. Or it's clearer what they're going to use to address which services or opportunities in the market.
Yeah, one thinks of the South African situation where there are people who've never had a fixed line telephone and who never will.
Right. And the trend is downward, so those that haven't had it probably will not.
So in the rest of Africa, I mean, what is the balance between fixed line and the development of the mobile operators? Because again, you could invest, it always reminds me of the old Durban station. If you look at railways, they built this massive new Durban station which replaced the old Edwardian station in Durban just as the traffic dropped.
Yes.
They built the station and there were no trains.
Okay, there are a couple aspects to it, and fixed line is also a broader term than most people, I think, appreciate. Most people probably perceive it from the point of view of historically copper lines. Fixed line is actually now moving towards fiber optic lines, fixed wireline per se. Specifically, when it comes to the state of play in Africa, mobile is far superior to fixed lines in terms of its penetration, services it renders. In most countries, not all, exceptions such as Botswana, where fixed lines, comparatively speaking, are higher than in many other countries as a penetration of population, for instance. But in most African countries, the amount of fixed lines in sub-Saharan Africa is minuscule. It's in the literally tens to a couple 100,000 of lines for populations of into tens of millions or hundreds of millions, almost in the case of Nigeria, for instance. Mobile is evolving through new technologies, as you mentioned, such as LTE, for instance, the so-called 4G technology, and also evolution in WiMAX technologies, and more recently Wi-Fi, which is a fixed wireless technology, access technology. It's evolving to the point where it can and has started delivering services what fixed line would traditionally deliver. And part of it is because of lack of fixed lines. So they had to adapt and take advantage of market opportunities. But the fiber optic is the new game. And when it comes to consumer residential population, then most Africans in Africa will not see it, probably in many in their lives. But when it comes to business applications and high-end consumer, then it's beginning to happen in places such as South Africa, in business environment, Kenya, slowly in Nigeria, Ghana, a couple other markets. But this is where fixed line is going to make a re-entry into the market because when it comes to quality of service that can be delivered and quantity of service in terms of bandwidth consumed, nothing beats fiber optics at this point in time.
What about South Africa in terms of policy? And we've got government with in the policy arena. We've got Telkom, which is 40% government owned. There's a controversy about that. And you've got these big players, Vodacom and MTN in particular. What is the state of play? Are we keeping up? Are we falling behind in some areas?
With the rest of Africa? We're not falling behind. In fact, we're still leaders in many developments.
But you feel we could have been further ahead?
We could be further ahead, and I think some of it is stifled at this point in time by the government not exactly crystallizing what it has in terms of its policy or vision for the country as far as broadband penetration goes, the 2020 plan. We know they want 100% broadband accessibility by people and hopefully use, but exactly how that's going to be deployed, who's going to deploy the networks to reach everyone, how the services will be delivered, none of that has been really planned at this point in time. What's happening in South Africa, which is leading other African markets, is greater evolution in terms of the enterprise market segment. We've got a lot more players who have been coming in over the past couple of years, such as MTN Business, but more recently Vodacom Business, IS, Internet Solutions / Dimension Data has always been an enterprise market player, but they're moving into own infrastructure development now, was before they provided services.
There's a question I want to ask you about those big players. You've got these gadgets that can do everything, you know, take the dog for a walk, make a cup of tea, tune in to your ancestors. I mean, they can do anything. But they keep dropping the signal. The basic part of what they do, you know, you can't keep a conversation going. Surely they've got to invest more in just the basic connection.
Well, it's, and you're referring to mobile operators specifically, obviously. It's a combination of things. One of them is you have a certain amount of capital expenditure you're going to allocate to investment into your infrastructure on an annual basis. And we've seen an increase in that over the past couple of years, and fairly significant amounts into billions of rands and more than 5 billion rands per operator per year type investment taking place. So there is a lot of money being plowed into the infrastructure. But the problem is, you need to now allocate that across different needs from the network perspective and customer needs. And the two great needs, for instance, or overarching needs are, one is new mobile broadband network deployment, such as LTE, for instance, or 3G plus, which is an advanced 3G technology to provide fast broadband speeds to the population, to users. The other one is so-called densification of the network, so you put more capacity through.
That's what I'm talking about, I think.
That's what you're talking about. That's one aspect. So you're densifying areas where there's more and more traffic and demand on the network through greater usage, through more population moving into the areas, such as places in Gauteng, Western Cape. And the operators forever try to optimize two things. One is CapEx, how much are we going to put into new network development and data network development. The other one is how much are we going to put into improving the quality of the existing network, and also optimization on the backbone of the network. Well, the other aspect is 3G networks are often used for both data and voice, and whereas really they should just be used for data. But because of that, operators try to optimize both, and in the end up sacrificing on both quality of voice and quality of data to an extent. That's why you see dropped calls.